and 314 for a shooting at Century Theaters. They're saying somebody's shooting in the auditorium.
Roger, keep your fires west of the smoke. You're cleared hot. An officer hit. Send me the world.
Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again.
Welcome to Tactical Tangents.
Welcome back to Tactical Tangents. This is Mike. This episode is brought to you by Point 6. Point 6 merino wool socks and base layers are built with performance in mind. Merino wool is a great natural fiber that controls moisture, temperature, and friction to keep you comfortable, and I have been wearing their socks every day at work for years now. Their socks are made in the U.S. and have a lifetime guarantee, so go buy the last pair of socks you will ever need at point6.com. Today, I want to take just a couple minutes to address a message, or I guess you could call it a question from a listener that we got over email. By the way, if you guys ever want to interact with us and throw stuff our way as something we could either address on the podcast or otherwise, you can always reach out. Our email is info@tacticaltangents.com. You can also find us on social media and send us messages there. And we're usually pretty good about responding to those things. And if it's something I can incorporate into a show, I'm happy to do that. So we got a message from a listener named Brian, and he's got a background as a firefighter in the National Guard. He's a paramedic, and now he also works as a sheriff's deputy. So a very relevant line of work and a really cool combination of things, really. And one of the remarks that he made was that there are certain concepts or principles that are applicable to just about any situation or job. And that's especially true in these professions. And one of the principles that he was discussing was understanding what normal is. And his example that he gave was when he teaches a new paramedic, he has them put every patient on the heart monitor, even if at first glance it doesn't appear to be necessary, right? It might not be a cardiac related event. He still puts them on the heart monitor because he wants to train or condition them to recognize what normal is. And that will give you a better mental representation of what is normal, so that when something unusual does appear on the monitor, it's obvious, right? Something is off, something is different, something has changed. And he also compared this to doing drug interdiction work. Let's say you're on the highway and you're watching motorists go by and you see how they respond to seeing a cop. You know, it's inevitable that people are going to hit the brakes and slow down and stuff like that. You see what a normal response is, and things that start to stand out as unusual. Someone yawns as they go by, or they decide to pick up a cigarette and light it so they keep their hands busy. Things like that can be signs of that fight or flight response that suggests, hey, maybe there's more going on there than just, I was going a little fast back there, right? So the concept or principle here that stood out to me as he was describing this is described really well in the book Left of Bang, which is kind of one of our required readings. It's very OODA loop. And what they talk about in this book Left of Bang is trying to detect an imminent attack before it occurs, left of the bang on a timeline, right? So most of the time an attack occurs and we respond after that. We want to get left of bang is the idea. And in this book, one of the things they talk about is establishing a baseline and then looking for anomalies. And they also talk about seeing anomalies in clusters. One anomaly can be nothing. It could just be, hey, something weird, something stood out. 2 might be a coincidence, but 3 is a pattern. 3 anomalies is something that you need to address, right? And obviously, in some situations, one single sign of an imminent attack could be enough. It could be substantial enough or telling enough to act on that alone. But when we start to see these things in clusters, that's when we have to be really careful about what we might be missing and what our next move is going to be. And we got to respond to that, right? We don't want to just ignore those signs. If they start clustering up on us, we need to pay attention. The same is true here in the context of Brian's examples, right? In a medical assessment on a patient, you always follow this algorithm. You do it a consistent way. You have a flow and you check the same things even on otherwise stable and okay patients, because it teaches you it kind of fine tunes that baseline. You learn what normal is. And even from one person to another, you could take a baseline set of vital signs on a patient and then track how they change over time. That's also important, right? And from time to time, you'll start to notice that things might be a little bit different on a, one patient or another. You might say, hey, is there a medical condition that, or past surgery? And you start to kind of dig into those things and you learn the explanation. Okay, this thing looks a little off. Hey, have you ever had, any heart issues or anything? Okay, yeah, it's a genetic thing. He's had it since he was a kid. Perfect. Okay, now I know that came from, right? Maybe you are in the habit, let's say in your assessment of, hey, someone's complaining of chest pain, and even though we're thinking it might be cardiac related, I'm always going to look and feel their chest to make sure that there's not something else that I'm missing. Because even though there might be signs that point to cardiac related, maybe there's some other underlying cause, and you look and you see some bruising, and you learn that, like, hey, they got in a car accident and they hit the steering wheel a couple days ago, and there's some bruising there. And so that might steer you towards, maybe instead of a cardiac thing, it's like a blood clot thing. So constantly being in this pattern of doing your assessments the same way, being consistent in the way that you approach problems, helps you establish a better baseline so that you don't miss stuff, right? Maybe when you're looking at their chest, you see that there's a pacemaker, or they have a medication patch, and that gives you some clues. But the idea is, you're in the habit of investigating and challenging assumptions and looking at that baseline and anomalies and never settling for the first easy thing that comes to mind. One of the favorite examples of this that I teach new cops has to do with traffic stops. Everyone, I mentioned this, that everyone's going to hit the brakes when they go by a cop, right? Everyone's going to be at least a little bit anxious when they get pulled over by a cop. It's normal. They're like, oh man, I got caught. I got in trouble. I'm going to get a ticket. Like, they're a little bit stressed out. And as a police officer, you pay attention to those things. And usually when I approach a car and I see someone's a little nervous, I try to put them at ease and be cool with them and say, hey, like, I give warnings a lot, like, just relax, like, what's going on? But what happens is you start to realize what normal stress looks like, right? And then on the day that you see someone that's like sweating, or they're visibly shaking, or they're constantly looking down at their phone, or something like that, they're doing these repetitive behaviors, white knuckle grip on the steering wheel, something like that. Now you start to go, okay, this could be a really serious sign, and this could be maybe they're hiding something, but maybe my safety's in jeopardy right now. If you're not paying attention, you're not going to pick up on those things. So just because you spot these anomalies doesn't mean they're just immediately a threat, but it could mean that you want to dig a little bit further, right? They're hiding something. Maybe they're wanted. They have warrants, any number of things, but it's noteworthy and it demands exploration. So it's a lot easier to figure that out when you've been establishing, you're in that kind of, ever curious state of mind where you're like, hey, this is normal. This is normal. This is normal. That's not normal. That is not normal. Let's look into that, right? This is where you also see this is if people are lying to you, right? If you are paying attention when people answer questions, right? And you see like, hey, I asked this guy his name and he hesitated, or he had an answer so quick, like he rattled it off so quick that it sounds like he already had that planned. It wasn't like I asked him a question, he considered it for a second and then answered. He immediately had this script. And that can be kind of a concern. And that's another one. If you're actively looking for those things and you watch the body language when you talk to people, you'll be naturally inquisitive and open-minded. You'll start to notice things, right? So establish a baseline, look and scan for anomalies, respond to clusters or patterns. Those are kind of the key takeaways in this principle, and that applies to just about anything that we do in any of these professions. It's applicable somewhere, so take a look at it. Now, of course, I have to caution you here, especially for the cops listening that are going to make use of force decisions, that it can be pretty easy to make a mountain out of a molehill here. Like maybe the guy is just naturally nervous about getting pulled over, or has some other, stuff going on at home or whatever, and you don't want to turn that into a bigger deal than it is necessarily, right? You have to be careful about that. So there might be perfectly innocent and reasonable explanations for some of the things that you're seeing. So it's easy to see what you want to see at times. So you got to tread carefully and make sure that you're being objective and that you're not tricking yourself into thinking everything is something, right? So be deliberate about it. I want you to be inquisitive. I want you to explore those things, but I also want you to have good judgment and common sense and be careful, because these decisions that you're going to make are important. So it's okay to explore those things. Just consider, if it walks and talks like a duck, it could actually just be a goose, right? So use good judgment, think critically about how the scenario might play out if you're wrong, and then make your decisions accordingly. All right, guys, that's all I got. Anomalies, baselines. Check out the book, Left of Bang. Hope you got something out of it. Good talk.